This is Note-Taking Guide 7.1. Today we're going to talk about flow charts. This is the class Mathematical Decision Making for Life. So a flow chart is a way of visualizing the flow of data. It can be used to show the sequence in which something works. It can be used for anything from making a cup of tea to an advanced computer database. So really what a flowchart is a visualization of a list of steps of things to do kind of thing. So you could do it you could draw a flowchart up for just about anything. The purpose of all flowcharts is to communicate how a process works or should work without any technical or group specific vocabulary. So again, like I said, a visualization of what kind of order you would do things in. So in a flowchart, symbols represent certain things. So if we're looking here, the oval or circular kinds of shapes are used to mark the ending and beginning, the starting point and the ending point, which is really kind of easy to remember. Plus they'll be at the front and the top and the bottom of the flowchart. Arrows are used for connections. They connect two actions together. So arrows are for connections. A parallelogram is used for input and output. So input and output. A rectangle is used for processes. It's representing a single step. And then this diamond or a rhombus is used for branching or making decisions. So when we look at the flowcharts in just a minute, just kind of keep those shapes in mind. All right, so what we're going to do here on these is we're just going to look at these flowcharts and we're going to try to decide if we can tell what the flowchart is asking us to do or what it's describing. We just want to write what the flowchart is used for. So it says up here at the top, it says start. And then it says turn on hot and cold water. And then it says too hot or cold. So did you see how the diamond one was a question? So too hot or cold, if the answer is yes, then you would adjust the hot and the cold taps. If the answer is no, then you would wait for 2 minutes. Okay. If you said yes and you had to adjust the hot and cold taps, then you would come back up this direction afterwards and repeat the process again until you come down to here. Then the next part says, is there enough water? If the answer is yes, then you turn off the hot taps and cold taps. If the answer is no, then you wait for 2 minutes and you come back through and then ask that question again. So again, I like to look at these diamonds and realize that those are questions. Okay. And then turn off the hot and cold taps, and then we're at the end. So what does this flowchart describe how to do? I think this flowchart describes how to fill the bathtub with water. So I'm going to call this flowchart bathtub. Maybe even fill the bathtub. Because I think that's what it's asking us to do. Turn the water on, check the temperature, let it fill for 2 minutes. Pretty sure that's a bathtub. All right, okay, let's look at another flowchart and see if we can tell what it's describing us to do or wanting us to know what to do. So start, then we come down, read the cost price, read the selling price. Is the selling price greater than the cost price? If the answer is yes, then we have profit. If the answer is no, then we have a loss. The cost price minus the selling price would be how much loss we have. So it tells us to do the cost price minus the selling price. That would print the loss of how much we have. Over here, if we had profit, then we would do the selling price minus the cost price. That would print our profit, and then we come to the end. So what is this flowchart helping us figure out how to do? This is a profit or loss flowchart. It helps us determine if we have profit or loss for the things that we're selling. Okay, third one to look at and determine what kind of a flowchart this is telling us to do. And this is kind of hard to read because I had to make it small on here. But up here it says start, and then it says throw the dice. And then it says move the coin. Coin meaning is the thing that you pick to represent yourself. Anyways, it says move the coin. So throw the dice, move the coin. Then it says, did you land on a snake head? If the answer is yes, then you slide down the tail of the snake. If the answer is no, then did you land on the bottom of the ladder? If you landed on the bottom of the ladder, then yes, move up the ladder. If no, did you reach the last block of the game? The answer is no, then you go do it all again. If the answer was no here, you went and do it all again. So looking at this, can you tell what this is trying to help us do? I think this is how we play the game called Snakes and Ladders. This is a children's game, if you didn't know that. But this flowchart is telling us how to play the game. All right, this last problem or example on today's note-taking guide is a huge flowchart that is for a doctor's office. So it says write the text in the correct position on the flowchart. So I always like to look at my flowchart and start. I'm just going to read these over here, and I'm going to decide what would be the starting point and what would be the ending point of my flowchart. That's just the way I like to start. So it says ask for a patient's name, waiting room, patient completes registration forms, patient sees doctor, patient needs to update records, patient arrives, is the doctor available to see the patient, is the patient information up to date, patient leaves, is the patient registered. So what would be the very first thing that happens and the very last thing that happens? Well, I'm going to go with this. I think that the very first thing that happens was that the patient arrives. I think the very last thing, I just highlighted patient leaves. Patient arrives would be the first thing and patient leaves would be the second thing. So in my flowchart, that's what I'm going to do. This is going to be the patient arrives, and I don't have very much room, so I'm just going to abbreviate. So PA for patient arrives. And then down here at the very bottom, the circle down here, this would be where the patient leaves. Okay. The next thing I like to look for when I have to fill out a flowchart like this is, if you remember along the way during this note-taking guide, I kept telling you to remember that the diamonds, or those are also could be called a rhombus, those diamonds are questions. So I have one question right here, two questions right here, and three questions right there. So 3 total questions. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to look at the questions that are over here. And it's really easy to find them because they have question marks here. So is the doctor available to see patients? Is the patient's information up to date? And is the patient registered? So if I go to the doctor's office, I'm going to decide which one of those things are first, second, and third. Well, the very last thing that's going to happen is I'm going to hopefully see a doctor. But I think that that's going to be number 3, is the doctor available. So I'm going to put doctor available for this one. And I'm going to start crossing these off when I use them. So doctor available to see the patient. Then the next question one, is the patient's information up to date? And then the other one is the patient registered? I think we have to be registered or look at that registration information before we know whether or not it's up to date. So up to date's going here, registered's going there. And I'm going to cross those off so I know I used them. So I've used everything from here up to here at this point on my choices. Now I just need to figure out what's going on here. So the patient arrives. Let's gonna look and see what's happening next, okay? Are we going to ask for the patient's name, Send them to the waiting room. Patient completes registration forms. Patient sees doctor. Patient needs to update records. I think the next thing that's going to happen there is I'm going to ask for the patient's name. So I'm going to just put, I'm just going to put name in here for that example. I'm going to ask for the patient's name off over here. If I come down my flow chart, so I got the patient's name, now I'm going to come down and I'm going to say, oh, are you registered? If the answer is no, then guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to have the patient complete registration forms. So registration forms is going to go here. If the patient said yes, then we're going to ask him if their registration forms are up to date. If the answer's no for being up to date, then guess what we're going to have them do? We're going to have them update their records. So then that one's gone too. So those ones are gone. So update their records, and then guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to send them to the waiting room. After they're at the waiting room, I'm going to see if the doctor's available to see them. If the doctor is available to see them, then the patient sees the doctor. Oops, wrong one. Sees doctor, which is the last one over there. And then the patient gets to leave. So again, the way that I like to fill out the flow charts is I like to start with the beginning and the end. Then I like to go find all the question ones to put in, because once you know where the questions go, it's kind of easy to follow that flow chart through. All right, this is the end of the note-taking guide for this section, you guys. Good luck with your homework.